Hello, YME community and stakeholders. This is Superintendent Rich Schneider. This recording is intended to give you an update on the results of our community survey that we conducted earlier this year. First, I want to briefly remind everyone how we got here today. There has been ongoing conversations over the past years about how to best address the needs of our districts in terms of facilities and grounds. Like most school districts, we are unable to fund our buildings and facilities upgrades with our current funding. We began a process of assessing our facilities for deficiencies, including conducting a thorough facilities analysis, and decided to put together a task force of about 40 community members representing all of our different communities that are served by Yellow Medicine East School District. After several meetings, a recommendation was made to the school board that is outlined within that survey. The school board then decided to survey the community to get their input to help determine their desires with respect to this project. This is where school perceptions and Daren comes into play. They were hired by the school district to conduct and interpret the survey. I will now turn it over to Daren, and he will review the results.
Hello, Yellow Medicine East community. My name is Daren Sievers, and I'm a project manager with School Perceptions, and I'm going to share the report of the survey results. So I'm going to share my screen and page through a PowerPoint we put together to share out our findings. So today is April 7th, and the data that we processed is current as of this morning. This is how the presentation is going to flow. We're going to give you a brief background about our company, and then we'll dive right into the survey respondent information and then our results and analysis of findings. So School Perceptions is an independent third-party research firm, and our mission is to help educational leaders like Superintendent Schneider and your school board gather, organize, and use data to make strategic decisions. We've been doing this for 23 years. We were founded in 2002. We've conducted over 3 million staff, parent, student, and community surveys in all 50 states and 5 foreign countries. And we've helped over 1,000 school districts with strategic planning and referendum planning, just like the Yellow Medicine East community is working on right now. A little side note, before working for the company the last 3 years, I was actually a customer of School Perceptions in a suburban Milwaukee school district where we use this identical survey process to help with our facility planning process. So I've been on both sides of the table, and it has been my pleasure to work with your thoughtful board and thoughtful leadership team led by Superintendent Schneider. So here are our findings. So the survey had a deadline of March 10th. We have been processing surveys after that deadline because we never really shut the survey acceptance off. We just needed a deadline to give people kind of a ballpark of when we needed the surveys back by. We had a very good response. We had 809 respondents to the survey. In contrast, we did another project for the district back in 2023, and there were 642 respondents. So a nice uptick in respondents as we talk about the future of your facilities in your community. That comes to a 22% response rate, number of surveys back compared to the number of surveys mailed, which is well above our company average. Our company average is 18%, and again, your community response rate is 22%, which is nice to see. That gives us a margin for error of plus or minus 3.52%. That will be a very important number when we get to our findings at the end of the presentation as we give a prediction of voter support for the project. As we studied the data, there are a number of ways we can look at who took the survey. While it's completely anonymous with a alphanumeric encrypted survey code process where the surveys can only be taken once by each respondent, the distribution of ages was very, very typical for the communities we serve. The largest group was the 65 plus population, and the second largest was the 35 to 44-year-olds. 65 plus, we typically see this because these are the retirees who are on a fixed income, and are watching very closely to see what is going to happen to their property taxes and their personal budget. And we were glad to hear from them at a high rate, so we know how they feel about the project. Another group that we watch very closely are the prime parenting years, the 35 to 44-year-olds. They're the folks that are in the schools or have their children inside the schools and see how the proposed project could impact them and their families. Next slide shows the percentage of folks that took the survey who are residents. 92% of respondents said that they are residents. That means they are voters and taxpayers. 7% said they are not, and 1% weren't really sure if their municipality was inside the district or outside the district. Now, you may be asking yourself, how is it that someone who's not a resident took the survey? I thought this was just a survey of Yellow Medicine East residents. Well, that's true, but we did send the survey to parents and staff. And some staff may work for the district, but may not reside in the district and may not be voters, eligible voters within the community. And as the survey went out to parents, you have some families in Yellow Medicine East that are open enrollment families. That means they choose to send their kids to your school versus their neighborhood school, and they can't vote either. So know that going forward, as we study the support for these projects, we will be focused on the 92% that can vote. We value hearing from staff and that don't reside in the community. We value hearing from parents that don't reside in the community. But at the end of the day, we're trying to measure what taxpayers are willing to do with this project. Another way we can study the data, again, while it's completely anonymous, it is important for us to be able to study the data by age groups, by municipality, as this slide shows. And as you can tell, far and away, the most survey respondents came from the city of Granite Falls, followed by the city of Clarkfield, Minnesota Falls Township, and so on. And your school board and Superintendent Schneider have studied this very deeply to look at what the changes were from municipality to municipality, what the support levels were. All the data that we're sharing today has been studied actually by municipality as well. So it shows that your board is being very conscientious, trying to understand how every municipality has reacted to the survey. The next slide showcases the percentage of survey takers that were employees, the pie chart on the left. 13% of surveys returned were from employees that are residents. Now, it's going to be very important for me to point out something here. We study census data, and as we give a calculation of support, we have to correct for overrepresentations. And by that, I mean 13% of surveys returned were from employees, but less than 1% of voters in the school district are employees. So at the end, we'll correct that so that the projection of voter support isn't overly represented by staff. Because again, staff are about 0.8% of eligible voters in the community. And the same with parents. 32% of respondents were parents, but about 25% of the Yellow Medicine East School District boundaries have parents as eligible voters. So it's a bit of an overrepresentation of how the parents feel. So we'll correct that by weighting these things proportionately. Now, if you follow that math, that means that 75% of voters in the school district are not parents and they're not staff. So that is the group that we study very closely because any project would have to have support from the non-parent, non-staff in order to be passed because they're 3 out of 4 eligible voters. Next slide talks about communication, and this is a very important slide for the school district team to study and understand for their efforts going forward. The question was, how do you like to receive school and district information? The light blue bar represents parents, and as you can see, busy parents prefer convenient means of technological communication, email, phone notifications, particularly for those wind chill and snow days, social media, school district website. But towards the top of their list was also a school district newsletter, something mailed to the house from the school district on a maybe a quarterly or twice a year kind of a basis. So that's going to be very important for the school district to understand as they share out the findings of the survey and the accompanying next steps. The purple bar are the non-parents, non-staff, that group that we just talked about being 75% of voters. 65% of the non-parents, non-staff said that newsletters are their preferred means of getting school district information, followed by the Advocate Tribune, which is nice to see. We love to see local newspapers being a good source of information on everything, but particularly school news for the school district. And then followed by the school website and social media. So this will tell the school district how they can get back to all those people that took the time to take the survey and those that did not, and let them know what they're thinking and what they're going to do next. So now let's talk about the survey. The next several slides are screenshots of the survey itself. We did educate survey takers about the tax rates in Yellow Medicine East for residential properties compared to those around the state and the state average. And then we did the same with agricultural tax levies locally compared to the school districts in the region and the state average. Again, the state average being in yellow on both of these slides, and the neighboring districts in the region being in gray. The next slide shows the parts of the survey where we educated the community about the facility challenges that the district is facing: aging infrastructure, outdated safety, security, and accessibility, and inadequate classrooms and support spaces for learning. Based on that information, we did ask the first question in the survey next, and that was, should the district explore a bond referendum to address these challenges? Now, you'll notice there is no price tag attached at this point. This is just an open-ended question where we say, should the district do something to address these facility challenges? And as you can see, staff, parents, and non-parents, non-staff all supported the idea of doing something to varying degrees. 91% for the staff, 80% for parents, and 55% for the non-parents, non-staff. This is good to know, because if those groups would have said, no, let's not do anything, it's not the right time, that's where the board most likely would have just stopped and said, hey, we'll just come back and talk to them at another time. But this led to the follow-up questions on the survey, and that is a recommended plan. The district had a plan that they wanted to test with the community, and that was a plan that would build a new middle school, high school, and a new elementary school attached to components of the existing building. It provides secure entrances, upgrade classrooms, add technology and education slash shop spaces, agricultural spaces, greenhouse, the essential elements of remodeling the school and making it something that addresses all those facility challenges. We also provided information in the survey about what the funding would look like, knowing that there's an ag to school credit in Minnesota that provides 40 million of the 75 million necessary to do this project through a state credit program. And then the next slide showed residential, commercial, and ag home property owners what the tax impact would be for them if this $75 million project of building a new elementary and high school with all those additional spaces would be supported. This is what it would do to various levels of property value. We want to be right up front with taxpayers about what this project would cost them so they can vote accordingly and take the survey accordingly based on how they feel about their family economy and whether this is an investment they would want to make in their local school. So as we studied the findings, we start with the staff. 89% of staff that are residents said they would probably or definitely vote yes on this project. 7% undecided, 4% said they would not. Just for your information, the 7% undecided, actually lower than average. Typically, we see about 11 to 12% undecided. So this tells us that staff residents were crystal clear on what was being asked of them, how much it would cost, and what their stance was on the project. And the same could be said of parents. Again, they're 25% of voters. 79% said they would probably or definitely vote yes. 5% undecided, even lower than staff, and 16% said they would vote no. Now, the next slide is that group that we talked about that is essential for any project to have support, and that is the 75% of the community that are not parents, They're not staff. And their support showed 51% of the non-parent, non-staff would probably or definitely vote yes. 14% were undecided, right just slightly above that average range that we see as a company tracking our data year after year. And 35% said they would probably or definitely vote no on this project. So, as I said, we need to correct the over-distribution of staff, the over-distribution of parents, and reweight all three of these groups to make it align with eligible voters. And that's what we do on the next slide. We weighted staff at less than 1%. We weighted parents at 25%. And then we weighted the non-parents, non-staff at the accurate 75% of eligible voters rate, took the percent that said they would vote yes. And our projection, as we sit here today, would be that if the vote were held right now, 58% of voters would vote yes to this new high school, middle school, elementary school concept to create a K-12 building altogether. We did ask the
So
question.
Darren, you
Oh,
want to
yes, sir.
review how accurate is that? If you had to anticipate with your organization, how do you folks look at that? How do you decide how accurate that is?
Yeah, great question, Rich. So we've been tracking every project we've done for our 23 years, and as I said, it's we've worked with 1,000 districts. Technically, we've done actually over 1,300 projects in our history, and our prediction rate is 94%. Now, as I talked about earlier, there's a margin for error that we need to account for. The margin for error was 3.52%, plus or minus. So our projection would be maybe it could be as high as 61.5%, or it could be as low as 54.5%. But we still, knowing Minnesota has to be a 50% plus one vote state, our projection would be that there would be support right now as we stand here today. And 94% of the time, our data has matched what happens at the polls, and our predictions have been right. Now, that does take into account 6% of the time we've been wrong. And there are a number of reasons. Through the years, a few things have happened. Sometimes we're just wrong. Something changed between the survey and the vote. Other times we've been able to track down what happened. We've had districts where maybe a group got together and said, no, we're against this, and they maybe campaigned on the no side of things. And we've also had districts where maybe and a new assessment went through that raised taxes before the vote went forward that would have raised taxes even further. And the domino effect was too much for voters to endure. But 94% of the time, our data has been correct. That means if we predict it's going to be a yes vote, we've been right 94% of the time. But as an independent company, also, when we've said, no, you don't have support, 94% of the time our data has held true, and that no has been the outcome of that election. So that's why we really pride ourselves on getting feedback from every member of your community. Notice we mailed a survey to every household in the district. This is not a random sample approach, it's a community-wide approach. And we want to hear from everyone, and we process every survey that we get. So we also study if people said no, why. We want to understand and report back to the district why people that were against a project would choose that answer. And this is a distribution of the reasons. Number one reason, tax impact was too much for those families. Number two reason was the 75 million was too big of a price tag for the building project. Third was they weren't supportive of a new elementary school. And the fourth was they weren't in favor of a new middle school and high school. Interesting, your board chose to do new elementary and new middle high. And as you can see there the data was very split, 49-48. One was against one was against the other. And so it shows that the board was really trying to take an approach where all students would get a new updated facility, which seems like a really smart move on their behalf, given that split that we're seeing in the data. And then there are other reasons. Some folks were against the auditorium, some folks were against the outdoor areas. While we were interacting with the community, we did ask the community for feedback on just how things are going at the school in general. four areas: delivering a high quality education, keeping the public informed, management of funds, and building pride in the community regarding the schools. The rating scale was on a scale of 1, poor, to 4, great, with a true median of 2.5. So the 2.5 being considered average. As you can see, staff rated all four areas well above 2.5, and so did parents. Non-parents, non-staff had the scores hovering right around that 2.5 average range or just slightly below. What we did on the next slide is combine all three groups together to give a percent in the first column of great or good scores, threes and fours, and an overall average taking all three of those groups averaged together. And as you can see, all four areas were slightly or well above the 2.5 average scoring range. And then finally, the last question in the survey was on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend the district to a friend or family member? For me, as a former principal, former superintendent, this is a question that I like a whole lot because we always feel good as school leaders when families are saying you should send your kids to that school because it's a neat place to learn. And on that scale of 0 to 10, Yellow Medicine East average score was a 5.88. You'll notice that the highest scoring area was a 5, the neutral. That tells me that probably a lot of those non-parents, non-staff just don't know enough about the school to really weigh in strongly to the high or the low side. So they took the kind of the middle in approach. But what was also neat to see is the percent, 20% gave the district either a perfect score or a 9, and 34% gave the district an 8, 9, or a 10. 46% 7, 8, 9, or a 10. And those are the folks, those are the folks in that 7 to 10 range that we correlate to referendum success because they're more inclined to vote yes if they're feeling really good about the district and would recommend it to a friend or family member. So that is our summary of findings as we stand here today on April 7th. It has been a pleasure to work on this project with your school board and your superintendent who are trying to do exciting things for the children and families of the community. And I look forward to supporting them throughout this journey moving forward. Thanks for watching today.
Yeah, thanks, Daren. Hey, remember, if anybody's ever has any questions, please contact our district office, 320-564-4081, or you can also email me at rschneider@isd2190.org. Thanks again, Daren.
You bet. Have a great day, everyone.